Morning everybody, welcome to our first Infrastructure and Planning Committee meeting for 2024. I invite Councillor O'Brien to open our meeting with a karakia.
Tōka tātou, te inui tātou, ka tohi e te tohi anu, ka tohi e te tohi arangi, I tupu I hoku ngā pū, ngā weu, ngā more, ngā pūkena, ngā wānanga, ngā tauira. A tēnei te kimi noa te rapu nui te take te āku uru o nā arangi tūhā. Whakaia kia reite, uhi, pero, tau mai te Māori haumi e hui e...
Taiki.
Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, this is our first live stream meeting, so I've just got some notes here that we should be just aware of. So today Whakatane District Council officially goes live. We will now be live streaming our council and standing committee meetings held here in our total room within the council building. The webcast will live stream directly to council's website and YouTube channel in real time. The purpose of streaming our meetings is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making and to encourage transparency. To those members of the public here today, all care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, by remaining in the public gallery, it is understood your consent has been given if your presence is inadvertently broadcast. Please be aware the microphones in our room are sensitive to noise, so can you remain quiet throughout the room are sensitive to noise. So can you remain quiet throughout the meeting unless asked to speak. For health and safety, in case of an emergency, please follow the building wardens or make your way to the nearest exit. The meeting point is located across the road in Peace Park. Bathroom facilities are situated in the chambers foyer by the Margaret Mahy entranceway. We will now proceed with the first item on the agenda. Thank you. So we'll begin with apologies. Are there any apologies? Councillor Rangiaho, you have a comment?
Yes, an apology to leave at 1 o'clock, Chair, due to another meeting. That's if we continue over that time.
Thank you. So there are no apologies. We now move to announcements or tributes. Are there any announcements? Tributes? Being none, we move on to conflicts of interest. Do any members have conflicts of interest to declare?
No.
There being none, we move on. Public forum. We have no public forum or deputations for this meeting, so we'll move to item 5 on the agenda, which is confirmation of minutes. So, and that was for our meeting on the 30th of November. So are there any corrections to those meeting minutes? There being none, do I have a mover and seconder that the minutes of the Infrastructure and Planning Committee meeting held on the 30th of November 2023 be confirmed as true and accurate record? Councillor James and Councillor Boynton. So is there any debate? Being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now move on to reports. On item 6 on the agenda, Infrastructure and Planning Report presented by General Manager of Infrastructure, Mr. Bevan Gray. Thank you.
Morena koutou. Just want to acknowledge we've got a tabled item here, and it's in relation to one of the reports, one of the tables in the report. It is just some supplementary commentary information to go along with the report.
So I should have mentioned that the report is on pages 9 to 20 of the agenda. Do you have any points you want to raise?
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight that so it follows the same format as previous. We start off with the regular automated reporting out of our project oversight system. So just note that additional supplementary information in there. The system's one that we've set up for regular reporting that makes the process a little bit easier to track all of the projects that we're managing. One of the challenges it does have is that it's not used on a daily basis, right? So it's a system we use to manage and provide updates through to elected members and key stakeholders. So it's in effect, it's another job for project managers and staff to undertake. What I'd like to highlight is that we're moving through to a new system ahead of the LTP. So when we kick into the LTP from July onwards, we'll be using a new project management system. That will help project managers do their job and make their job easier on a daily basis. And because of that, they'll use it daily. And so you'll always have live and up-to-date information, and it won't be another job on top of people's current busy roles. So really looking forward to getting stuck into that and getting some good reporting out of it through the LTP process. In terms of the rest of the report after the project updates, we've got some overviews of what's sort of been happening over the last quarter, notably the Landing Road roundabout, an update for that. All the works were done within the time frame we identified. We're just working with Places and Open Spaces team now to do some of the green spaces, and we're working with Te Runanga o Ngāti Ao around some cultural design for the centrepiece. Peace Street upgrade was another significant project that we've undertaken over the last 6 months. Most of the roading stuff is well on its way. We've got some process with the stormwater stuff that needs to go through a resource consent, so that's a little bit of a hold on that piece, but we're still continuing with the rest of it. There's a couple of items in there around closed landfill. We've had over the last 2 years, we all acknowledge the challenging weather events that we've had. Those have had significant impacts on our closed landfills. And so we've got a couple of updates there around what we've been experiencing and where we're at in terms of making sure we deal with climate change and significant rainfall events at those landfills. It's reasonably straightforward, and I'll take it as read and happy to answer any questions.
So questions of clarification? Got Councillor Dennis in your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on, and Councillor Deputy Mayor Emick. Right, so Councillor Dennis, thank you.
In regard to 3.8.2, the closed landfills remediation works, I noticed you mentioned the Te Teko closed landfill and the Burma Road one, but I know you've been doing some work on the Marata one, the investigation work. Is there a report for that, or is that still ongoing?
The Marata work was in relation to a piece of compliance work with Regional Council, so that involved the vegetation clearing. We did some additional gas monitoring. At this stage, there's nothing immediate that we need to do for Marata. The two that we've mentioned in the report are active, where there's active work going on at the moment.
Can you just explain briefly why they need to clear the vegetation? Is that to stop the roots structure interfering with the cap?
Yes, yeah, a couple of points. So Regional Council undertake walkovers of our closed landfills to assess them for any signs of gas leakage or leachate or anything like that. Because Marata got covered through the Awatarariki debris flow, there was a lot of vegetation has grown back and they couldn't access to do the walkover, and so we've cleared the vegetation to enable the walkover. We did the gas testing to make sure that there wasn't any issues with gas. Also, big trees will drive roots down through a cap into the closed landfill, so that's the other part of the vegetation clearance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bevan. With regards the Landing Road roundabout, I presume we did some monitoring traffic flows well before the work started, and I guess that we're going to be monitoring afterwards to see what, in a quantitative way, what the impact has been. Are we not planning that? Because otherwise it's just everybody, some people say yes, some people say it's improved, some people say it hasn't improved, but I'm just wondering about quantifying that.
Thank you. I'll ask Annie to speak to that one.
So yes, through the chair, we do have some traffic data available for us that sort of shows flows, both even dating back to before the teardrop went in, during the teardrop, after the teardrop, before the current works and after. But we're still just working through processing that among a raft of other things at the moment. But if it's a priority, we can sort of move that along more quicker. But I just also want to remind people that the main purpose of that project was a pavement renewal project. There were some associated improvements, but improving congestion wasn't the main focus of that project. It was about renewing the pavement, the curb and channel, and some of the other services in that area.
Not a main focus, but nevertheless,
But still useful,
Yeah,
and
so-
hence why we've got that data. We just haven't.
I guess we'll be comparing similar times, periods.
Yeah.
Before and after. Okay, thank you.
I'd have to say, if I may, that all the times I've used it, been a huge improvement. Easy to use. So, Councillor Deputy Mayor Hammack.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Good morning, everybody. Even just in terms of the tables that you've got here, whether it's supplementary or one of the others where you've got a revised budget. So, to help us keep track of it, why do we not include a column of what the budget is? Like normally when you're doing project development, you've got your set budget and then you've got your actual budget. And so when we see a column of the revised budget, we don't know how much overrun we have, or we can't ask questions about why.
Yeah. So in the database, we have approved budget through the LTP or through an annual plan process. What tends to happen is that a lot of these projects are multi-year projects. And so the revised budget will include the multi-year budget. We do capture actuals as well, but it's not an automated process. It's a very manual process at the moment, and by the time you get a report, it will be out of date. So we're reporting sort of backwards. The other part of it is if you start to add all of those columns in, say you've got a 3-year project, you've got year 1, year 2, year 3, and then a revised and then an actual. The report gets quite big. What I'd like to commit to, though, is with the new system going forward, you'll get a lot more clarity around the budget process, and also how we're tracking in terms of phasing, schedule, risk, and all that sort of stuff rolled up into one good report.
Okay, and just a supplementary. So when we look at our CapEx delivery over the year, I know we don't quantify it with delivery of 60%. Like, where are we capturing the delivery, and whether it's an annual CapEx capture or the term capture, the 3-year program?
Yeah, very good point. This is the last year of our 3-year LTP program, so you'll get some really good information at the end of this year. You'll recall in July, August 2022 and 23, we did a bit of a program delivery update around what we've delivered in terms of budget and percentage to date. In the first year of this current LTP, we had a lot of that stimulus stuff as well, still sort of hanging over. And so I think our delivery from a Three Waters perspective was up at around 140% because we had all of those projects. In a normal business as usual, you'd expect it to be less than 100% because of the fact that projects do cross multiple years. So you will get a really good update for this current program at the end of this financial year, and we'll give you more clarity on that as we go through the remaining 2 quarters of this financial year.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Chair neglected to do a commendation at the beginning of the meeting, and that was to congratulate the General Manager on the successful delivery of the Braemar water upgrade project.
Before I invite Councillor Isles, just a question for the people at the back. Can you hear us okay? Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Page 16, again, item 3.6, the Landing Road roundabout update. 2 questions. Firstly, I realised that we had to do away with the gardens on the roundabout due to the redevelopment, and I was basically assured that some of that green grass area would be put back into gardens. Is that the interpretation from the landscaping works that are being progressed in conjunction with places and open spaces? It is.
Yes, yeah, there's still some landscaping work on.
So there will be gardens being reinstated into the right-hand side?
Yes, around the outside of the roundabout, so nothing will be in the centre of the roundabout for health and safety.
Correct.
Reasons, but around the outside, and we're also working with Te Ruranga o Ngāti Awa about sculpture in the middle.
Thank you. My other question is, I'm a little bit confused over the question that was raised by the Mayor with regards to the survey of the traffic flows, and then your comment about the pavement upgrade. But at the same time, we acquired that section at the intersection, so we provided those teardrop passes and what have you. And from my observations, it certainly has alleviated the traffic build-ups that we've had. And I thought a good indicator was through the Christmas period, and now that schools are back, the traffic seems to be flowing. So I think it's more than just an upgrade, isn't it? It has alleviated a lot of the concerns that were raised while that Landing Road intersection was under reconstruction, and it also brought to a head the demand by a lot of the residents with regards to a second bridge. It seems to have ebbed a little bit too since the roundabout has been up and operating successfully. So it would be interesting to see if you are doing some sort of traffic count on that to see how things are progressing.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. Probably one thing I'd like to highlight there is that with good asset information, so a lot of the infrastructure team have really good understanding of the infrastructure, where it is, how old it is, and when it needs to be renewed. So Annie and her team will have known for a while, quite a while, that at a point we would need to do a pavement rehabilitation on that roundabout, and that we could know that 10 years out from when it needs to be done because of the information and condition assessment we're undertaking. That gives you the opportunity to have conversations about what are the challenges we face in that area and what are some of the things we can do to make that better or alleviate some of the issues. And so when that property came up for sale, we had the conversation around, actually, could we do something better here? So the primary driver was the renewal of that pavement, but it has so many other benefits, and we managed to line all of those up.
On the Apanui Linear Park project, which is in the table on page 15, I've had some emails from concerned citizens about the trees that are there. The project, the Peace Street is it's being worked on, but the linear park hasn't quite started yet. Will those trees remain there? And if they're not going to remain there, why would they be taken away? Because they're quite nice trees. That's what people are asking me.
We can get an update. I'm not sure. Do you know?
Yeah, I can provide a bit of a response on that. So my understanding is there are some trees that do need to be removed both along the roadside. There's been a couple that have been removed, and within the stormwater reserve as well. Now I know for the ones along the roadside, before that work was undertaken, there was a big assessment done of all the trees along there to see what was in conflict with the work and what sort of impact that would have, whether the trees were such that would be best to save, or whether there was alternate trees that could be put in, and that work was all done in conjunction with the Places and Open Spaces team. So there was a couple of trees identified. I think a couple of them were actually benefiting from being removed. They were, not in the greatest health, and so they've been replaced with new ones. The ones in the stormwater reserve, where they're going to be daylighting the stormwater pipe and creating a bit of a wetland through there, there's some trees that will now sit in the new wetted channel, and they won't survive in that sort of environment, and they'll affect the intent of that work. But again, there's a whole lot of vegetation that's happening as part of that project. So where there are some trees having to be removed, they will be replaced with at least the same number, if not more, vegetation as well. And all of that's being done in conjunction with the Places Open Spaces team. And certainly all care is being taken to reduce the number of trees needing to be removed, and making sure any that are offset.
Can I get that person that communicated with me to communicate with one of the team members so that you provide a proper response?
Yeah, I believe that's already happened. I think earlier this week, I think when they contacted you, they'd also contacted
Okay, all right, that's already...
I'll follow up on that, just make sure that they've been responded to.
I think there was a letter to the editor as well, which we've responded to.
Oh, okay. I haven't read my beacon.
Councillor Brangiaho.
Bevan, page 15 with our coloured maps, in terms of the three waters, so we've got Murupara wastewater discharge, all green light, but not started. Is there a reason for that?
So that's the conversation. So the resource discharge consent.
Yeah.
So their conversation with Ngāti Manawa around the need for the wastewater consent renewal has begun. So that's why that one's a green. It's the actual delivery of the big project in CapEx that is part of the upcoming LTP process.
Okay, just to follow on the three waters theme is also with the Ruataki water treatment and the Taniatua wastewater treatment. Now we've got a green ahead, even though it's the planning. So we have amber sitting in there. Is it a significant issue regarding to those amber lights sitting in there because of budget constraints, or is it moderate issue that is manageable?
I probably can't speak to the resource consent one. Nicholas might be able to, but I can talk to the Ruatoki water treatment plant process. So that one is amber because we're trying to find a suitable water source. So we've drilled a number of bores where we thought there was good water. We've come across water, but some of them have had elements or minerals in it that would make treatment quite difficult. So we've found one that's quite promising at the moment, and so we're continuing to undertake further investigation. The reason it's amber is because we'd hoped it was done a lot earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Carlos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Bevan, for your report. I have two areas I wanted to ask questions about. The first one's on page 17, relating to the curbside recycling standardisation. So it's great that we're taking grade 5 plastics, because between 1s and 2s and 5s that's involved. But we haven't been taking them before. So, what facilities do we have available to us to handle the 5s? I know it's a legislative requirement, but
So we don't have the facilities. We get collected and sorted at the transfer station. Anything that's picked up through the curbside collection goes straight to the MRF in Tauranga. So that's the something resource facility. That's where the recyclables are sorted and dealt with, and then the ones that we collect here go through to there as well. So
and they've got markets for 5s.
we don't have the facilities or the additional needs for we don't have a space or use for them. So it's part of the direction from central government.
Just out of interest though, so why were we not taking fives before?
Legislation.
We didn't say we couldn't take fives. It just didn't require it.
We were following the guidance, which means that if we started collecting fives, then it's an extra sorting requirement when it goes to the resource facility.
But now
They don't have a market. They didn't have a market for it, so because it's been driven by central government that we now will collect fives, they have to have the market, and so we can pass that on.
Yeah, thank you, that's really helpful. And the other one was around the airport, and there's a couple of things. One was the, it said somewhere here about, terminal redevelopment replacement feasibility study. Will we run into problems with Heritage New Zealand? Because that building's a listed building, isn't it?
I'm not too sure whether it will be problems. There'll definitely be conversations.
That was a very politic answer. All right, and the airport users group, saw them passing in the corridor. How did that go? Is there anything to report from them?
So there's a meeting tomorrow to discuss the fees and charges.
They've already had one, though, haven't they?
They had a first airport users group who I think it was towards the end of last year.
That's right. Yeah.
Where they identified a key representative group. So that key representative group is where we'll be going to for the fees and charges consultation. They will seek some feedback from their wider members. So there's a meeting tomorrow to progress that conversation, and then we'll take some feedback, we'll put it into our proposal, and that'll be rolled up as part of our LTP consultation process. In terms of the ongoing master plan development, they've had a lot of input into it so far, so we're getting very close to community engagement on it.
That's great having that available as a bouncing. That's great. Thank you.
So now we have Councillor Boynton and then Deputy Mayor Emma. Can I just remind you to not shout but speak loudly, probably. Thank you.
E mihi atu ki aupu Bevan motori purota. My part really was just on 3.7 to do with the Peace Street, Brabant Street mahi that's happened there. I got two questions. The first one was, much like the landing road, is there monitoring to see what improvements there are in terms of the safety that has been increased in those areas with those raised crossings that have been put in place?
There, we use a system called crash analysis systems like that to make calls around where we implement safety improvements. Mm-hmm. So we've identified that that intersection there is one where we've had a number of accidents. That will be part of our ongoing tools for managing and understanding whether our safety improvements were effective. I don't know whether we're going to do any other further immediate stuff other than utilising the information we get from police or the CAS system. Annie, would you have anything additional to add?
Yeah, so that intersection did have quite a high crash history, so those raised crossings were driven more from a road safety point of view rather than a lot of the other ones. It's more like our active economy. It's trying to enable active travel, whereas that one there was actually an identified risk both with pedestrian cyclist movements but also vehicular movements at that four-way intersection. So it was identified not only by us but also nationally. The Road to Zero program has a pipeline tool where they identify high risk areas like at a national level, and so it was also identified there. So we've got that history, and then it's just going to be a matter of time as people continue to use that intersection following the upgrades. We'll monitor it and make sure that we're seeing those crash reductions that we expected.
That sort of answers I had a supplementary question which was around, I had feedback around people questioning why is it only that area that's receiving that kind of work, where we've got crossings throughout town that are just the normal sort of flat crossings for pedestrians. So there were people querying, why does this area of town receive this work and how come it's not across the board?
Kia ora, acknowledge that. In our third report, where we talk about our transport program of works, some additional information to that is a whole bunch of projects that we can't do. So I guess the driver for that one was a stormwater upgrade and rehabilitation of the P Street. So we've taken the opportunity to put in place safety improvements as we're doing it. So like the Landing Road roundabout, the driver was the rehabilitation work. But we do other stuff to make the most out of the time we were doing the work. So with Landing Road, we did a whole bunch of Three Waters work, as well as relocate the roundabout to make traffic flow a bit better. With P Street, we are implementing a number of other projects at the same time to get the best bang for buck and dig once. The other side, other challenge we have is funding. So some of the raised crossings are quite expensive, and it does take out those roads for a period of time while we're undertaking the work. So we've got quite a list of things that we would love to do, and it's about funding and making sure they are scheduled in the right time to make the best bang for buck. So if you've got rehabilitation programs of work around those intersections, and they are areas of concern from a safety perspective, they'll very likely get those treatments at that time too.
Deputy Mayor Emmett.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just looking at page 18, number 6, Port's operational plan. So it says here that it's been prepared for public consultation. Do we get to see that before that occurs?
Yes, you will.
So the consultation with the partners and the harbour users is going on at the moment.
To shape it up and get some clarity on it. It's quite a complex environment with multiple partners and stakeholders in it. So we talked yesterday about the spit fuse and wiring and all of that sort of stuff. That's all kind of wrapped up in that environment. So we're trying to get all on the same page and figure out how does this all sit in relation to future boat harbour, increased usage, all of that sort of stuff. So trying to nail down that before we comes into council for your oversight.
And just considering that we've got in Whakatane a lot of waterfront redevelopment going, is it the right time to do it now? Like, how often do we review this when we've got the boat harbour impending, the flood protection things going on?
It should be reviewed quite regularly. There's a number of consents that are in that space as well, so it makes sense to review it. It's an operational document as well, so it's how do we interact with our key partners, who's responsible for what. We know that with the impacts of climate change, the marine environment's changing. There's a lot more silt and sedimentation coming down, so that the dredging requirements have changed as well. So we update that document. We should be updating that document quite regularly and being very clear what our responsibilities are as a result, and making sure we're budgeting and programming the works that we need to do for it.
Does that include Thornton as well? Like, when we look at our ports, we've got a few, haven't we?
Thornton, so in terms of the channels and everything like that, that's regional council. We do have fourth infrastructure there though, which is part of our maintenance plan.
Thank you.
So we have Councillor Isles next, and then Your Worship, and then Councillor James. So Councillor Isles, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Tantros' concerns over item 3.8.3 on page 17. along with the typo that comes after the national standardisation, which is printed here as scandalisation, the last line, we will no longer accept aerosols. And I mean, we do accept cans and tins into recyclables. So I don't ever recall seeing that mentioned in some of the media releases, but they now go to landfill? Is that the...
Yeah, so they will go into your residual waste, refuse. I'm pretty sure I recall seeing it, but I'll follow up. And if it is a genuine item that's been missed from it, we'll make sure that it's very clear. I think some stickers are going to get sent out for the bins anyway.
Just that on some of the radio and TV, they mention the cans and the tins, but yeah, and the pizza boxes, providing you scrape the cheese out of them. But yeah, I don't ever recall the aerosols, and that's always been a big one in my mind as to where the devil they should end up. So, okay, thank you.
Coming back to the raised crossings that Councillor Boynton raised, thank you for giving me the costings on them, but I wasn't quite sure how much of that we pay and how much Kotahi pays. And now that the road to zero is either ended or going to be ended, will we not be continuing with those?
Annie can probably speak to that. I know the Transport Choices program has been cut, but I think there's still a Road to Zero program, is that right?
Yeah, at this stage, Road to Zero hasn't been cut. We are still waiting on the updated GPS, Government Policy Statement, which will set sort of funding bands and priorities for Kotahi and transport investment for the next 3 years. But there will still always be a place for safety. Road safety is still an ongoing issue in our country. So the priority and where it sits compared to some other things like resilience and maintenance may change from what it has been, but it will still have a place. But yeah, we're still waiting on that updated document. So there will still be a place for roading improvements that help reduce deaths and serious injuries. And we still have our active Whakatane strategy, which promotes enabling safe walking and cycling. So the shape and form of those improvements, will always be determined on a site-specific basis. So I wouldn't say wholesale that they're going to stop, but also wouldn't say wholesale that they're going to continue it. We'd work through that on a project basis. And in terms of the costing, so all of our transport, basically all of our transport, local road improvements and maintenance is funded currently at 63% by Waka Kotahi. And the new LTP, that increases to 65%. So yeah, all of those roading improvements, that portion is funded from the National Land Transport Fund, and it's the residual amount that's funded by the local council.
Thanks for that, because I had previously thought I heard that we were coughing up for 50%. It's not 50%.
No, I think nationally it averages about 50%. Different councils have different funding assistance rates depending on their socio-economic circumstances and the like. But yeah, ours is currently 63, moving to 60.
Questionnaire, Councillor James.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine was pretty well covered by Deputy Mayor Immick. I was just querying about the consultation on that with the port operational. Just wondering where we were at, because we haven't really had the consultation.
We've had direct consultation and feedback from users, but there'll be a wider consultation that follows the final drafting of that plan.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so the recommendations are on page 9 of the agenda. I propose that we take them as 2 separate items.
Chair,
Do I have a,
my apologies. I had one other question of clarification, just going, because I'd forgotten about the recommendations. Thank you. It was just on the page 19 about the Shapley Place. I was just, because it talks about near misses being reported when exiting the intersection. How many? Like, is that a big issue, or how significant is that?
I don't have exact numbers, and I'm not sure for a lot of them if they've been recorded or if sort of feedback passed on. We could certainly look through some of our avenues if we wanted that quantified. The way I've sort of tried to describe it in the report, it's not like a pressing, urgent issue that we must attend to, like we have some other situations, but I suppose it's a known issue that has a relatively low cost and simple solution that would counter that known issue, but for obviously there's a disbenefit with that solution and the fact that it would lose some car parks. So it's just around making a decision. Do we want to act on that now on that basis, or do we want to sit back and monitor?
Councillor Rangiaho.
So losing off the 5 car park spaces, the effect on the business, is there other alternatives where they would be able to?
Yes, so I haven't done like a detailed car park analysis of that area. We could do that. We've done that in other situations, and for a small area it's relatively simple. But in general, it's basically just out there. The most direct building is actually the council building that's affected, and a lot of people more tend to park in this area. In general, there's spare parks out there at most times of the day, but certainly that's hence why we're presenting it here for comment, whether people are, whether the consensus is to proceed as we currently are, or whether there's some more information like that that people would prefer for us to gather.
I do understand, because I use that a lot, and sometimes I have to end up in the middle of the road before I can, when I should just go round the back. Okay, thank you.
I think what we've tried to do here is, like Annalise has said, we've received some anecdotal feedback or evidence that there are near misses, and we're looking for the least cost kind of process or treatment to try and mitigate that risk. And I'd like to think that we continue on doing that where we see issues, try and address them with the least cost and least impact to communities. We do acknowledge that car parks are very precious to businesses, and so that's why it's here on tables, because it does have that public impact.
Yes, thank you. Actually, following on from that, so those businesses are aware of this proposal, that they're going to lose a couple of car parks? 5. Well, a couple on the council side, yeah. And so are they?
We haven't made direct contact with them yet, so again, that could be.
Did we not do that first?
Well,
we're going to make a public decision, and they don't even know about it.
Yeah, in some instances we would. I suppose in this instance it is a relatively short number, like small number of car parks that they are publicly utilised car parks, they're not the businesses' owned car parks.
Key stakeholders.
They are key stakeholders, and that would certainly, before we went to roll it out, we would have those conversations. I suppose what we were trying to gauge from this is whether this is something that we should continue to invest time in progressing, or whether it's preferred that it's off the table. So again, happy to take that sort of feedback. If before a final decision is made, we make that contact. I mean, most businesses are always going to want more car parks, so it's around talking to them about how we can manage those concerns.
We've got no recorded accidents, just near misses, and we're going to take out 5 car parks with no open consultation.
Well, we wouldn't take it out without consultation. So what we're seeking is a direction from elected members that this is something worth progressing.
But it's in the public now. This is on a public agenda.
Correct.
And they don't know about it.
It's been on This
Since November,
item
yeah.
has been in a previous report.
But it may change the location.
I think there's a proposal to come to item 2 that will make that clear. So, anyway, we have Councillor Riles.
Thank you, Chair, and I gather that I'm preempting where you were going. You were asking for a mover for resolution 1 only. So I'm happy to move that recommendation, bearing in mind your thoughts with regards treating item 2 as a separate recommendation.
Councillor, but before we do that, and I see Councillor Tangos will second that. Councillor O'Brien, you had a question.
I just wanted if you could get away with keeping 3 of those 2 of those 5 car parks. No?
Wondering whether we could.
Yeah.
So this option here was, there was another way that you could configure the line marking, but it resulted in more, I think it was about 8 car parks being lost. So this was already the reduced number, like this was already the least impact option of how you could configure that line marking.
So we have a mover and a seconder for recommendation 1. So if there's any debate, I propose that we put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. So for item 2, I probably won't be Annie's friend, but I would propose that we reword that slightly rather than an amendment. And I'll read the reworded proposal. That the Infrastructure and Planning Committee request further monitoring of the Shapley Place / Commerce Street intersection in regard to the proposed installation of a right turn bay and potential removal of 5 on-street car parks.
I'm happy to second that.
Right turn bay.
So I'm moving that basically in a nutshell that we don't do anything but do further monitoring.
Could you just clarify the right turn bay portion?
That'd be in the road.
Sorry, so the right turn bay, the proposal that's been put forward is to change the line marking that's there. There's currently a very narrow central median that can't hold a car, so basically cars either straddle it and have potential conflict with the oncoming car, or they overstep into the left-hand lane and cars go around cutting into the cycle lane. So this is changing the line marking so that we can widen that central median so it can actually be a full width right turn bay, but that's what loses the car parks because you then have to push that left-hand lane where the car parks currently sit.
Mr Chairman, can I just clarify that question of Councillor Isles? So is that turning right from the stranding, or is that from when people come out of the driveway and turn right and sit in the middle before there's a gap? There's 2 ways you can do a right turn there.
So the right turn bay is to enable people coming along Commerce Street turning right into Shapley's Place. Technically, you shouldn't pull out and wait in the central median, but that's what does happen. A right turn bay does help with the right turn exit movement as well. The other advantage that this change would have for the right turn exit movements is it removes the car parks on the left hand side that currently interfere a wee bit with visibility when turning right, and it also places the lane heading towards the Strand closer to the exit lane, so it makes it easier for that right turn exit movement as well. So it does have safety benefits to help those right turn movements in and out, but obviously it has the disbenefit of losing car parks because there's only so much width and it's just about how that's allocated.
Since you're changing the wording, and we've technically had our questions, but I'll allow the questions to continue. So we have Your Worship, then we have Councillor Tantros and then Councillor Dennis. So.
It sounds reasonable, your new wording, but I'm just wondering about how you would go about monitoring, because so far all that's on the table is some anecdotal evidence people said that there was a near miss. So how would you actually do it? Otherwise, I'd simply vote down that proposal. But anyway, I'm just wondering how to monitor a near miss.
So near misses are recorded, but they're not recorded in a way that's like easy to deliver, like out of our crash analysis system where we can easily extract data. But we get RFSs through people phoning up council saying that they've had a near miss or they're worried about an intersection. If members of staff had it, we can make sure that they're entered in Vault. So there's a number of recording systems that could be utilised, but the trouble with near misses often they are under-reported. But I suppose it's just a case of us making sure that that information is being reported and we can monitor it through that.
Just a supplementary to that, then by definition, what is your definition of a near miss? I mean, if a car passes within 30 centimetres, is that a near miss, or how do you mock that? Yeah, I've got a problem with near miss.
So there are some technical definitions for it under the Health and Safety at Work Act, but that's not my area of expertise. But in basic terms, it's where incident nearly happened. So there was potential for harm to personal property, but by luck of that situation, it didn't happen in that case, but there was potential for it to happen. And a number of near misses will happen, and then eventually the stars won't align and it can. I suppose the biggest issue here is the fact that people are having to veer into the cycle lane to pass a vehicle that's waiting to turn right, and that's the biggest potential risk because the likelihood is relatively low, but the consequence is very high. The movements through the intersection, in an urban area, the people inside the vehicle aren't as at risk as the cyclists when people are veering into their lane to go around them.
So the reason really for my wish to alter the wording is that we don't lose the car parks for a start, and that we're not overreacting to an issue that may not be an issue really. And I can understand there's a risk there, Eddie, and we've got to be conscious of that. But it's like an elephant to crack a nut, really. I don't think we need to go that far. So I have a couple of other names there. Are they questions or rather debate?
My question is really, it was kind of similar to Victor's around what the intention of the reworded recommendation were. In terms of what does how actively were we? Because I wouldn't like to see it turn into a $100,000 exercise when it started as something quite minor. I think that would be a bit of an own goal. So that was my question. But I think it's kind of been answered, I suppose.
Councillor Dennis.
Debate rather than a question, sir.
So we have a mover and a seconder. Okay, Annie.
Sorry, I just have one slight question clarification, which you may want to include in the wording. With the further monitoring, do you want us to include consultation with the property owners that are going to be most affected? Would that have an influence on any future decision making? So do you want us to actively do that, or?
We go knock on the door if it's...
Yeah, we can easily do it. Yeah.
I think that's important, Annie, that you do that and
Absolutely.
add that.
Consultation with the residents.
Because that's going to give you some guidance rather than the truck turns up and starts changing the lines and they wonder what's going on. So we don't want to be the bad councillor in that. Councillor Boynton.
I'm not sure. I think it may be a debate as well. Just looking at where that is, there may be also a public perception because it has to do with where the council building is as well, and that is that right? Is that correct? That, the focus there, if we are going to make those changes, particularly without necessarily having proper consultation, because it's been put into a public arena right now, with businesses that, it may not help our sense as a council that we're sort of, it may come across as we're sort of looking after our own little area without really talking to our businesses. I'm not saying that's what it is, but because the area there is to do near the council and to a lot of the council vehicles that will be going in and out of that area, including ourselves, it may have a perception that, it's not desirable. So I do support that we look at the monitoring of that, and that we do include that, of course, that businesses surrounding are consulted with and spoken to about the best solutions to work out the issue, but also to around what are these near misses. But I did also want to support what Councillor Tanchel said in regards to what would be the actual cost of this, and has that been included in the budget? That was my concerns: costs, the perception from our communities around the council just sort of focusing on itself. Thank you.
So perhaps we can give the officers a direction in terms of that one. And you're quite correct. We don't want to spend $1 zillion to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I think the important part really is to keep an eye, a watching brief on it, but the consultation is probably the most important to do right now, if that makes sense. So we are in debate. So Councillor James.
I'm only asking that before we put it to the vote, can you reread the recommendation for us, please?
We're just going to add consultation in. So I'll...
Excuse me, are we still in debate? Because he wanted that read before we vote. So are we still in debate? So shall we continue the debate before we read the motion and vote on it?
Three of us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things I want to say. Is that for a long time I think Spencer Place has been regarded as a service lane rather than a road. And I know a lot of people avoid driving down it because it's regarded as a tight service lane rather than a road. And so I don't see that it should be treated as a normal road in regard to flow through. I am aware that it would be quite easy, seeing that our town isn't that big, that we could actually block off the right turn coming from the Strand down Commerce Street and into there. You could actually block that off and say it's a no right turn, and you'd eliminate most of your problems. But my biggest issue too is that we've eliminated a lot of car parks on the hillside of Commerce Street. You know, if you go down, you can see the pretty picture here outside Guthrie Bowen, whatever it was. There's some car parks here, but you go past that, there's very few car parks all the way down. Outside Hunting and Fishing, Countdown, all that, it's all gone. And if we start eliminating car parks on this side, what you're doing is you're almost punishing the business people in Commerce Street, which will end in empty shops, etc. I believe that the rural people need to have car parks close to the town centre for when they want to come and do their business, because they can't walk from Aniatua or Edgecombe or that way. They need to be able to park close to do their shopping. And I personally think that there is no case proven. I don't think it's actually a proper road that needs looking after, and there's other ways to get in and out of that. And we could mitigate it at a cheaper price and getting rid of 5 car parks by putting a no right turn there.
Your Worship.
I think I won't be supporting the amendment because, for reasons that have already been mentioned, including the last one. So, the lack of real data. I think we're maybe making a mountain out of a molehill. I could say that I had a near miss getting out of my car park in the council, actually.
I did yesterday.
Well, maybe. So I think that given that we haven't consulted, given that we don't have real data, that I won't be supporting the amendment. Thanks.
Do you think, though, that the rewording is an opportunity to provide that and the consultation?
No, I'll just stick with my. No.
Deputy Mayor Emick?
Actually, I'm echo the Mayor's same things. I won't be supporting it based on the locals not being involved.
So we're not supporting the amendment as well as the original?
Yeah. I don't think we need the amendment if there's a majority that's not going to support it.
So just to clarify, point of clarification, so we're saying to put another, after this one, if it failed, another one where it gets forgotten about altogether. Is that where you're both coming from?
We'll just go in and speak to the local business owners, see if we can get a bit more fact, and then
That's what I thought this amendment is.
Yeah, that's what
That's what it's trying to achieve.
So I think what we should do is I should put this reworded motion.
Yeah.
If that succeeds, that's the end of that. If it doesn't, then we revert to the original one.
Yes.
And go from there. So I'll Councillor Payne.
I think I just we're still in debate, right? So, okay. First of all, I just wanted to commend staff because I think what we've seen is an example of identifying a problem, a potential problem, trying to have a preemptive solution because we actually don't want someone to be knocked off their bike, before we take action, and try to come up with a low-cost, low-input solution. So I think it's good that the proposal is put forward. And I think, if you're talking about, we get very precious about parking. I think safety is more important than parking. Injury and death is more important than if you think about parks. So I think it's good to keep that in mind because we can get a bit carried away. But I do think it's important that we talk to businesses before we make any decision because we may find that the local business actually go, oh, there's always plenty of car parks, we're not that worried. Or they might be, concerned about it. So I think that would be useful information. And I think also it's not clear how big an issue it is, so I think a little bit more clarification on that. And if that's in the way of what Andy said about kind of more or less just collecting data as it comes in rather than putting in place a expensive monitoring thing that turns the whole thing into a major exercise, we don't want that to happen. So on that basis, I support the amendment. Or the new wording of that decision.
So should we change the word monitoring out of there and the collection of data, or we'll carry on with that?
Continue.
I'll read it out and then we'll put it to the vote. So here we go. That the Infrastructure and Planning Committee requests further monitoring of the Shapley Place / Commerce Street intersection in regard to the proposed installation of a right turn bay and potential removal of 5 on-street car parks, and to recommend staff engage with the local businesses on the issues and propose solutions.
Well, you can take out the recommend, because we want the staff to engage with the businesses. Recommend just, like I said, there's a choice.
Request stuff?
Yeah, request.
And to request staff engage with the local businesses on the issues and proposed solutions.
As seconder, I'm happy with that changed wording.
So I've moved and Councillor Dukes has seconded, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Is your vote recorded?
Can I just say something, Mr. Chairman? I note it's really interesting here that when we looked at the safety infrastructure measures from Awakiri to Whakatane, we were talking about people, say, in Shore Road, to actually turn into their own road. They'd have to go down a kilometre or two to the nearest roundabout and come back to it. Why in town here can't we actually block off that whole put a barrier down there so that people coming out of Spencer Road go left, down to the roundabout, turn around and come back, and vice versa. It seems that if we expect the rural people to do it, then it's only, 200 metres down the road, so maybe that's a thought that the staff could look at too.
So we've had the recommendation and passed, so we'll move on. It's now, 4, so I propose that we adjourn for morning tea and come back at 10:30. Thank you. Righto, welcome back everybody. We'll continue the meeting, just live streaming, so we'll continue on as we were, thank you. So we have the Matata wastewater project update February 24, being presented by Mr Woodley and Mr Bewley, and are on pages 21 to 27. So gentlemen, in your hands.
Thank you. So in this update, there's really 4 key points I'll go through, and then I'll propose some questions after that. And that's really just to update the Infrastructure and Planning Committee on our progress since the last update. So the first thing to note is that last month we installed 6 additional monitoring bores within the site. These are very shallow monitoring bores. You may recall that last time we gave an update, we discussed the seeps and some of the data that come out of monitoring some of the shallow water seeping out of the ground. So these 6 shallow bores have been installed to enable collection over monthly collection of shallow groundwater data to see what is happening with that very shallow groundwater and to see what level of contamination there may be in it. We have found some in the initial work we did, and you will note that in the deeper groundwater, below sort of 10 metres, there wasn't much contamination in the water, but in that very shallow seep we have found high levels of contamination. So these will allow us to get a data set per month to track what's going on there. But we do know that is water that is seeping out and into the lagoon as well. The one, now having said that, there is one of the surface water monitoring points with the Matata, which acts as a bit of a collection point for lots of those seeps, which is the shallow drain by the Matata Hotel, and that shows noticeably worse water quality than other areas within the town as well, and above and below. We've also expanded the monitoring of the Matata Lagoon itself to 3 additional points, and those are essentially along the bank of the lagoon beside the main road through town, to try and see what's going on there and to increase our coverage of monitoring essentially. We don't have a whole lot of data there to report on that, but in coming months we will have a better data set and so be able to report what that monitoring is showing. Second point I'll raise is that we do have our co-design hui coming up on the 26th of this month. That's an in-person workshop. We've got half a day booked, and we'll be doing some quite planning at that, and we're having to sketch out what the next few months look like in terms of the project, and there are some decisions that we want the co-design group to make, including the type of, if a scheme was to progress, what type of recommendation we would be comfortable with, and there's a few other matters as well. Certainly the co-design group have indicated a desire to come and present to council, to yourselves, and to give an update on the project and where we've come from and where we're going. So that is something that we'll look to tee up, I should say, in the future. But they are keen to come and report to the council and to the committee because they haven't done so. That's something that we'll be trying to arrange. And fourthly, just to note that we are still in discussions with some landowners around potential land disposal, land discharge sites and treatment plant sites. So if the scheme was to go ahead, where it could go, and that would give us a bit more, give us a little more concrete for the purposes of planning. So that's really the key elements of progress. Those discussions are still going, but they are going very positively at this stage.
Points of clarification? Your Worship.
Is the surface water monitoring program ongoing? And if it is it kind of consistent with what you saw before? Because what I saw before wasn't exactly making a compelling case. And the other thing is, when you say much higher, that's a very non-specific term. I mean, I could have 1 coliform unit per litre and it goes to 2, and that's much higher, but
Yeah.
it's neither here nor there. So I'd like some detail around that at some point, if that's possible.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. And that
Coming back to my monitoring question, are we
So-
still monitoring? And if
We are still monitoring. We are looking at refining that to cut down some of the deeper groundwater bores and refine it just to focus on, I guess, the key areas that we're interested in now. And as we get more data, we'll be able to provide a more comprehensive set of data that could be analysed, that will be analysed. In terms of those seeps, I mean, it's in the order of thousands of coliform units, but that's only from a one-off sample yet. As we get this further data from these very shallow monitoring bores, we'll see what picture that paints.
And we're filling in the fecal source tracking data, we're doing more of that?
Yeah. So as we get results that are higher, above 500,
The tracking on
we do the
those.
tracking on that. We can also go back. So that's through ESR. We can also go back and test it again. They retain the sample.
That's right.
And so we can go back and check it for other, if we check it for human and it gives us a result, we can go back and do fecal source tracking for ruminants, for cows, and other animals, or also for birds.
Yeah, there's a need to get some consistency, so I don't know when we tie a ribbon around
So
it.
the trigger is, when we get a results that show a elevated level of coliform, then we can go back and do that.
And can I be apprised of that as it comes through?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Rangiato.
Just in turn for clarification, the co-design group,
Yeah.
is that in collaboration also with Tangata Whenua Kona? With the hapu or iwi on that side, in terms of co-design? Because it's going to roll off with the environmental monitoring program, so we can have a scientific lens on it, but we can also have a Te Ao Māori lens on what that looks like.
Yeah.
Is that something that's still in working there?
Yes.
Because inside of this report it says cultural narratives and develop a cultural narrative for advice in conjunction working with the iwi and hapu. But I wouldn't like to just see it as narratives and technical advice, but also with the monitoring lens as well in terms of the environmental program.
Yeah.
Just a bit of clarification, co-design and the involvement of the environmental monitoring program.
So on the co-design group, there are representatives from iwi and hapu.
Thank you.
Locally from the area, and they're very much involved in driving that cultural narrative.
Nice. Thank you.
I'd like to back up what the Mayor says, is it's always good to get an overview of the technical testing data over a long period. I think people also need to be aware of the fact that the technical data is just one part of it. If we don't do anything and put it at a Maratā and articulation, Regional Council have already said they're going to put into maintenance zone, they're going to remove a number of houses up to 60 or might be less, and that due to the new rules of how much soakage area you need for a septic tank outflow, that some people will have to remove their, there's one place here with 3 units on it, they'll have to remove the back 2 to establish it as grass, so there's a lot of pain going to happen, and there'll be a lot of reduction, like there's only 240 50 odd houses in Manatā, so you take 60 of those away, you've actually reduced the place by a quarter.
Councillor Dennis, do you have a question? We're going point of clarification.
I thought we were talking about sorry, there is no vote to come with this, so there'd be no period to do debate, will there?
To receive
No, that's fine, I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Any further questions? Clarification? Councillor O'Brien.
Just timeframes. I mean, the Manatā thing has been in a long time.
Yeah.
So do we have any definite timeframes as to where we can actually get a spade in the ground?
Yeah, so one of the matters that we want to confirm through the next co-design hui is to plan out those immediate timeframes, what the next few months look like. That they will be driven by a few elements. One is progressing those negotiations with the landowners, so that if we can get some sort of agreement there, then that gives us a basis to come back to council with a scheme with costs, with detailed costs, as well as what would the land cost provide. We also need to do a BPO, a best applicable option assessment, and that will show, that analysis would show, we'll be able to compare that option that we're looking at for land disposal versus the status quo option, what that means, versus other discharge options. And we would be aiming to do that within, that's within this half of this year. We're also, depending on how those go, they need to go through a public consultation process, because ultimately if we did apply for a resource consent for a scheme, that would be publicly notified, and that would have to go through that process, but we really need to show evidence of consultation through that. So I guess there's a few key steps to go through, and some of them, I guess, have to be pinned out with them in terms of if we can do this and then present to this, then that allows some pretty critical decisions. But what I would say is that over the next few months, we have some pretty big decisions to make.
Further points of clarification? The recommendation is on page 21 of the agenda. The recommendation is that the Manatā Wastewater Project Update February 2024 report be received. Do I have a move and a seconder? Councillor Dennis and Councillor Isles. So, moving to debate, Councillor Dennis, welcome to continue your...
Well, there's no vote, so there's nothing to debate, so I'll just defer it. Thank you.
Oh no, I'm just playing with my pen. Mr. Chair.
Sorry, we understand, Your Worship. That's right. So look, if there's no further debate, we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the recommendation that we receive the report?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. So next item on the agenda is 6.3, 2024-27 Transport Improvement Project Prioritisation. This is presented by our Transport Planner, Mr Metcalf, and General Manager of Infrastructure, Mr Bevan Gray. So, gentlemen.
Kia ora everyone, while Annie and Joe make their way to the table. So this report's a bit of a natural progression in the LTP process that you've already gone through. You'll recall last year we had a couple of workshops, one around some of the problem definitions we have in the infrastructure area, transport area, some of the key challenges that we're facing, and that led into a bit of a prioritisation matrix and framework, which you had some input into. So at that point we developed the program. It was submitted through to Waka Kotahi on the 8th of December. just noting the time frame of the last infrastructure and planning was in November, so we're bringing this through to you today to approve for inclusion into the LTP. Some points of note, and I mentioned it earlier, is that in the appendix we've got a list of projects that we would like to do or we think that we need to do. We identify what those are, what problem we think that they'll solve, and their ranking in terms of that agreed priority in that matrix. If we had more funding and capacity, we would do more. So that's the challenge we've got. The other thing, so those will likely sit in the next LTP. So to my earlier point, we've got a long-term future program, and we're always thinking about what are the projects that we need to do in the future, what's the trigger, is it a renewal that's triggering a need, and then how can we align to get the best benefit out of it. So at this point I'll hand over to Annie and Joe to work the report.
So before Annie and Joe start, I was a bit remiss, we're on pages 28 and 39 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take the report as read, but I suppose just to quickly cover off some of the key points, carrying on from Bevan's introduction. So the prioritisation process that we cover off in this report would be familiar to what we discussed during the workshops that we did last year when we were developing our transport activity management plan. So it's a process that we've used to be able to prioritise the large number of requests and projects that come into the mix, and projects come about through a variety of channels. Customer service requests, maintenance deficiencies, safety deficiencies, future transport planning, and just to name a few. So part of the purpose here was to make it really transparent what is sort of on that future list, because it is quite a long list, and it's not something that we're going to be able to knock over in the first 3 years, or potentially even in the 10 years. And it is like a living list, new things come up all the time that continue to be added to it. And in the past there's been a lot of prioritisation going on, but more so in the background and more so at the officer level. So through the process that we went through developing the activity management plan, we really wanted to show the transparency around what we're doing and really bring the councillors along understanding and having that buy-in into that process. So that's basically what this report is about. And so we're at that stage now where a lot of the development into the draft activity management plan, which informs the long-term plan, has been done. We're going to be going out to public consultation soon, but it's still a few months away from having actual LTP budgets and things confirmed. But to really continue the progress that we've made in the last couple of years, being able to deliver our projects, it really means making sure that we're doing the planning and design work in advance of the construction season. So one of the key focuses here is to get a bit of a steer on are councillors still comfortable with the prioritisation process that's been used, and are they comfortable with the resultant list of projects that come out of that process, so that we can start working from the top down in terms of planning and designing those top projects that, regardless of where the final budgets end up, we can have a level of certainty that those at the top are going to be able to progress. So even if the initial draft budgets need to be reduced for any number of reasons, it's going to come from the bottom up, and so if we're working from the top down, we can make sure that we continue with the momentum we've got and be one step ahead in time for delivering our year one construction projects. As well as the construction projects, we've also spent a bit of time during the activity management plan development talking about our transport planning projects. So they won't result in physical works in the initial 3 years of the LTP. They're to work on business cases that are needed to then be able to do some of the high cost improvements later on in the LTP period. So we've also included those projects there. They are prioritised separately because they are a different function and a different funding category to our general physical works improvement. But they're equally important because they lead on to such high value works that they require even more significant planning and design work in the form of a business case to be able to progress. So it's really important to be able to progress that work now so that we're ready for that stage when those interventions are needed. So we've summarised what projects filter to the top of that prioritisation list and fit within that funding band that we sort of agreed was the recommended program to put into the LTP. And then we've also included, for transparency, those projects that fell below that funding band and were at the lower end of that prioritisation list. So this is just when we had the session where we talked about the program optioneering, we specifically didn't have time to cover individual projects. We were looking at things at a program level. So as promised, this is the opportunity now to actually look at things at a more granular project level. If you've got anything else you'd like to add, Joe, I suppose we can hand over questions and clarifications.
Councillor James?
Just a clarification, thanks Annalise. It's good reading. In Appendix 1, estimated costs, are they cost to council or total cost of the project?
Total cost of the project.
Okay.
And I would also add to that as well, certainly often the further down the list it goes, but even some of the ones near the top. So as projects are developed, the further along that development process, the more an estimate can be refined. When the scope is very loose and the project is in the early stages of sort of conceptual planning, there's a lot of contingency applied to those estimates because, if the scope goes this way or that way, it's going to have a big impact on cost. So as we work through the development of some of these projects, those costs will change in terms of the estimate. The intention is that a lot of them will be able to come down, but there's enough leeway in there for those that the scope grows beyond what we initially thought, that the contingencies included will be able to cover that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was just trying to establish in my own mind that all those costs there are roughly, there's only a third of it is out of the council pocket.
Yep. So all of the projects included here through the initial assessments we've done, they all qualify for Waka Kotahi funding. So in that 3-year period, they'll be obtaining 65% funding. So like I say, roughly 1/3 rate.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. In the Appendix 1 on the third line down, for those that did not make the preferred program, you've got Manawahei Road flood resilience. Is that in regard to Lake Manawahei, or is that just to do with the amount of water that accumulates on the side of the general road?
So if Lake Manawahei is in reference to the low-lying area about the 17-18k mark where we had flooding experience last year. So that is, there is a report that's going to be coming to the next infrastructure planning meeting that will talk about, I think the latest updates we had was we looked at some of the long-term options, and that is for the recommended improvements based on that flooding situation that occurred last year.
So that's not what this is referring to.
That is what that's referring to. So there's about $200,000 worth of improvements recommended to put in place.
So it hasn't been dropped off the list, it's just
No, it hasn't been dropped off the list at all. It's sitting there, and I suppose I could talk to that a little bit around. It's currently ranking C, which Cs are included in the sort of current draft program, but not all C, and the focus, the agreed preferred theme was those of resilience, so it's in there. So it sort of sits in the projects that could come in or out of that program. But because the bottom line for the draft LTP is fixed, for it to come in, another C resilience project would need to come out, or the budget would need to be increased to add it in. So this is where there is that sort of flexibility with being able to look at different projects and sort of where they sit. there has been some thought going into where it currently sits compared to some of those other resilience in it. And again, the report that's going to come to the next IPC meeting will go into that in a bit more detail, but a lot of it has to do with the reoccurrence periods of that flood event, whereas the reoccurrence periods of some of those other resilience projects that are in there are a lot higher. So there's, in theory, a little more time up our sleeve and in theory better to focus on those ones that have that higher reoccurrence, but it's very close to the top of the list.
Thank you.
Annie, I sit on the Regional Transport Committee, and we've got 7 projects on that list, many of which appear on these 2 tables. They go through a prioritisation process as well, subject to various criteria, which is similar to what you've got here. And they're evaluated by a thing called the Regional Advisory Group, the RAG, which I believe you might know. Those orders of those priorities don't coincide. And so for me, looking at it simplistically, that those priorities should sort of match up at the local and regional scale. Can you explain to us how that all of that works and how these 2 things go together? Not quite understanding. Plus, some of the projects, or all of our projects, almost are business case projects, but there are other business case projects on there. We've got 2 projects sitting in position 11 and 12, or 10 and 11, I can't quite remember, which means that they've got a good chance of being funded by Waka Kotahi. Is that not right? Well, anyway, if you could elaborate on those things, I'd appreciate it.
So, as a quick summary, the RLTP, the Regional Land Transport Plan, which the Regional Transport Committee endorses the prioritisation of the capital projects on there, that only goes as far at a detailed level for projects that are going to have a cost of over $2 million, and that $2 million is over the span of their life. So we've got 7 projects on that list, but only 1 in our current physical works list, because the one in the physical works list is the only one that's expected to spend that physical works money in the first 3 years. The other ones all relate to the business cases. The prioritisation processes are closely related, but not exactly the same, and the reason for that is the Regional Land Transport Plan is looking at it at a regional level. Our activity management plan and what feeds our long-term plan gives us the ability to put our local focus and flavour on what we want to put forward, and they do align, and we ensure they align, through some of that sort of strategic context stuff that we set in the activity management plan. But it does still give us the ability to show what is a priority to us at a local level. So when things like central government or the government policy statement changes, we can still ensure that our local voice is heard and that's represented. They are still certainly closely aligned. The 2 that are highest ranked, and even the 3rd one, that the modelling that sits beside those spatial plans, are our highest planning activities, except I would note in this particular table we've got the additional river crossings sitting as a priority 2 rather than a 3 out of a 1 to 3 scale, 3 being the highest. And the only reason for that, when this list was put together, was it's more of a scheduling priority, like a timing, rather than a needs priority. So the intention behind that is the transport, so the line item that's the Spatial Plan Transport System Program, which is the overarching transport response to growth driven through the spatial plan, to best inform where an additional river crossing would be needed and when it would be needed. You'd need to understand what the impact is on the wider transport network first. So it was about that transport system program happening first, and then the additional river crossing happening just behind that. The 2 would certainly have a lot of parallel overlap because there's a lot of things that are one of the same, but it was more meaning we can't just look at an additional river crossing in isolation. We have to look at how traffic is going to move across our entire transport network. But it is still being put forward in the LTP as running alongside the transport system program, so happening in that first three-year period. So I wouldn't be concerned about it being a priority too, and I think it's certainly something that we could look at reviewing since we originally did the prioritisation work on the planning activities, the RAG and RTC has done a lot more development since then, so maybe it's just a case of us coming back now that our LTP list has been confirmed, we just kind of recheck and see.
I would like to see them actually line up better, because I don't think they do. But just a question, if I may, just to follow up on the timing of this. The regional land transport plan is to be finished by June of this year. At the time, because you know more about it than I do, I've only been on there for a year. At the time that this plan is accepted, how does the funding then come after that? Is it automatically in, or?
Pretty much. It can take a couple of months, I think, and sometimes it's taken a couple of months for it to officially come through the system. But generally, once it's approved in the RLTP, it's approved in our Transport Investment Online system, which is where we physically obtain the money from Waka Kotahi. And then it's up to us as the people taking the work to just confirm where that timing sits, and within that much like our 3-year capital works program, there's a lot of flexibility. Once it's approved in a 3-year period, if it can be brought forward because things have lined up and we can get it underway sooner, that's fine. If it needs to be pushed slightly further back in the 3-year period because things haven't gone to plan, that's fine as well. There's a lot of that happens within that 3-year period. But yeah, pretty much when the RRTP is adopted, those budgets and those funds are approved.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Emick and then Councillor Ryle.
Thank you, Worship. Morning. Hi, Joe. Hi, Annalise. I know the D's and the E's don't make the cuts, but it's a really good read, and it's a pity we don't publish this so that different communities can actually see it's on someone's radar. But I do have a question about page 39. In the middle there, North Whakatane low traffic neighbourhood and Wairaka low traffic neighbourhood for safety, because that community's been asking for speed bumps for a long time since they've taken out. Are they talking about, is that speed bumps they're talking about, or is that like a rejig of something for $1.5 million for that end?
Yeah, so we haven't 100% scoped out what that project will look like. There's a whole bunch of consultation that will happen in advance of that. But it would relate to inclusion of speed humps, potentially some raised platform crossings, and those sort of interventions is kind of what we're looking for, sort of taking what was done with Innovating Streets and making that into a bit more of a permanent solution. Also what we're doing in that space. So yes, that would be a bit more than just speed humps.
Because I know that the boating community are not in favour of any speed humps, but I'd like to say the number of speed humps around the town now, another couple down Redaway Drive, from a safety point of view, there's no argument for that. I'd be surprised if any boat could get from where they live to the boat ramp without going over a few speed humps.
And just to build on that statement, once we put the speed humps into Canada, I haven't had a single complaint from a boatie about those, and we know that there are a lot of those travelling along it. So you're absolutely right. It's something that we just need to do just to make sure we've got the right sort of speed humps that aren't going to overly affect boat users. But yeah, there is definitely solutions we can use.
Thanks. If I can quickly add to that, just your comment about making this more publicised, that's exactly the intention of this, was to get some transparency, get some visibility on these things, so that people that have felt like they've complained about an issue or asked about something but haven't seen anything happen, they can see it's on the radar, but it's just a case of trying to balance the purse strings. And I think once we sort of get through this first stage of presenting this to the the planning committee. We'd like to see sort of subsequent reports go into community boards and that sort of thing, so they can see what's relevant. So that's exactly what it's about, and it's especially leading into the public consultation. It's a good opportunity for people to say, well, what else is missing? What else needs to be added to this list and considered?
Thank you.
So have Councillor Isles next and then Councillor Rangioho.
Thank you, Chair. Carrying on from the Mayor's comment with regards what's in or what's on the regional land transport plan, those 7 items that he's indicated, can we have them flagged in our future reports so that the 9 of us that don't sit on that committee have an up-to-date as to what is there and what stage they're at, whether at the design, planning, contract, etc. stage?
I can quickly run through them if you want. Right, so pretty much Keeper Road, and then the other ones are in that business case, in the planning table. We can certainly come back with a formal report, but if you're interested in knowing now,
I don't wish to say at the time of the meeting now, but if we can just have them as a future reference point would be great. Thanks, Annalise. Also, page 34, item 6.3. Right down the bottom of that list, we've got the Whirinaki Bridge, which is in the C category. We've got Taniatua, the Blue Rock Quarry, road, flood resilience, and then further along we've got the Devon Curves flood resilience. They're big ticket items, but they're categorised as C. Okay. Have we got any or can we have any influence over Waka Kotahi with regards to some co-funding? I mean, you know, Taniatua Road in particular, if the flooding occurs there, it cuts down the accessibility, of commuters, and can we put any pressure on Waka Kotahi to look at funding that? I mean, it's been in the work stream for as long as I've been here, I think, but we've never progressed it.
These are all co-funded. So are you meaning like 100% funded, or so all these projects will attract the 65% Waka Kotahi co-fund?
I would like to think beyond that. Yes. Is there a possibility that why should they not be higher up? Bearing in mind the resilience and the.
Did you have a comment, Bevan?
Yeah. Oh, you can answer it, but I'll add some additional context.
It's kind of why they co-fund the projects to happen. Mm-hmm. I think we would struggle to get them across the line as state highway resilience projects because, especially along that corridor, they've got so much pressure on their own direct state highway network, and often the flooding events that affect Taniatua Road sometimes even then affect the Kotahi Bridge and certainly through the Waimana Gorge. It's not off the table, but I wouldn't hold my breath over it. Our best candidate is moving these projects forward through, that's what the Waka Kotahi co-funds our low cost, low risk program for. And certainly that's why, out of the the optional projects, the C projects that can be in or out, depending where that bottom line is, that they are right at the top. And you may have noted on the ones that weren't included, the only other than Manawahe, which we've talked about, the only other priority C resilience project is basically the same type of project but for Ruatoki, either Reid Road or Awaho Road. But one of the key reasons for putting Taniatua Road first is if we lose Taniatua Road, people then often can't get to Ruatoki. So it's about getting that resilience along that route. And so once these have been dealt with, that very next priority is then doing the same thing in Ruatoki, because when that river comes up, we lose Taniatua Road, we lose access into Ruatoki, and they are ongoing, fairly regular occurrences.
And the other one is is that the electronic sign there that I see for 250k? Is that?
There's 3 VMS boards that we've identified there, and so that's to help with when we do have flooding or other sorts of incidents that unexpectedly close our roads, is to be able to provide that greater response to travellers. So the 3 sites is one at the bottom of Ward Road, Commerce Street roundabout, so especially that's for that Taniatua or Wainui Road, so that before people get all the way out there, they know which route to take. Another one on opposite the Landing Road Bridge on the new property that we've acquired where there's all the services. It's having it there so as people come into town, they can see which route they need to be taking in advance. And the third one, I believe, is on the Special Purpose Road to Whaiti before heading it up towards the Te Uruwinas. There's an old one of those like manual flipboard signs that say what's open and closed, so I was looking at upgrading that to an electronic sign as well.
So Annie, are these mobile?
No.
These are permanent?
These are permanent. So we already do own 2 mobile signs. The mobile signs are roughly 40 grand each. Thereabouts, including the trailer, and yeah, so we've got 2 of those, and they've been really well utilised. We managed to actually purchase those rather than typically they're hired, but because we had such a series of projects that we were going to use them for, we spoke to Waka Kotahi about it was actually going to be a better cost process to buy them rather than hire them. So yeah, we haven't at this stage considered purchasing more mobile ones, but this is certainly those key locations where they're always needed. You see them all over and this is one where Waka Kotahi may provide us 100% funding. We've been working with them on a national business case that they've developed for a series of VMS boards right across the nation, and our sites are included on that list, but they're quite low down, so they also told us include them on your low cost, low risk list, and at least that way, one or the 2 avenues they should be able to progress with.
Thanks, Annalise.
Just a bit of additional information. You'll recall last year when we had some conversations around some of the storm events and where we were seeing regular road closures, and then we talked about the Smith Road culvert replacement and that joint funding arrangement with Regional Council. I'd had some conversations with Regional Council around let's look at some co-funded resilience projects together over the term of this LTP. A lot of the places where we have resilience issues in roads is generally because of land drainage around those sites. So these are perfect examples of ones that we can start to have those funding conversations with Regional Council around. There was an element of appetite to continue the conversations. I don't know what their budget and their LTP is looking like. But now that we've got an agreed program, it enables us to start that conversation and say, look, we've planned something for the first 3 years of the LTP. We've got some Waka Kotahi funding for it. Do you want to align any land drainage improvements around it at the same time?
Thanks, Bevan.
Councillor Randy.
Hey, thanks. It's good to see the Ruaki, that Awahau Road and Reed Road sitting in the C category. The other one I want to go to, inside of here you've got the Ruatahuna speed management and safety, and I'm mapping Ruatahuna in my head. Where is that specifically? Because is it on our roads, it's like Sister Annie Road, Matatua Road, because I'm looking at that costing sitting inside of there. What does that look like, the speed management road? Oh, safety plan, Joe, or?
Through you, Chair. So that's looking at, I guess, the main street through Ruatahuna where the shop is and the visitor centre, and just looking at what we can do in terms of streetscape improvements and to control speeds through there as well, just to bring it down to a more sort of, slower environment.
Just out of DT, where the cafe is. Okay, thank you. The other one I want to go to and have a look at is external stakeholders when you talk about Koperiki Road, the Rabbit Bridge. And with their costing inside of there, you've got $1 million in there. Has there been any engagement with our Southern Generations? Is there any engagement around that? Because as we know, yeah, we've got the bridge, but there is also responsibility from Southern Generation because of what they say they own the water. But is there any working relationship around that? Because I think there was an engagement with some of our local farmers as well around the impact when that road got blown out, and there was a conversation around culverts and things like that. But has there been any?
Not as yet. I guess we're still very early stages of developing these projects, so we know that there's a problem here that needs fixing, and we know roughly what the solution may be that we can cost. But until we sort of have funding confirmed and we know we've actually got a project that's deliverable, we start that engagement at that stage.
It might be good to jump on the waka, considering the resource consent will expire very soon in a couple of years.
I can probably add to that one. I have had a conversation with Southern
Yeah.
Generation probably a year or so ago when we were in the old buildings, the separated ones. They came to have a conversation about it and identify the challenges they have in terms of dredging or clearing to enable better water flow. So the other party that needs to be in part of that conversation is regional council as well. Again, it's another drainage type issue that's creating a resilience issue with the road. So I think now again that we've got a program, I think we should be bringing those key parties together and seeing what we can do.
It would be great to see that, because even sitting on here, you've got the Whirinaki Bridge with works to be done, and the Kopariki Bridge. So it kind of really leave those communities isolated when they both go out. Yeah. Kia ora.
I have a left field question really, and it's about your mobile signs. Could they be deployed in an emergency event?
Yeah, we've used them in a number of emergency events. The majority used for roading purposes, but I do believe even when we had the issue up in Murupara with water, they were used in that, and we've used them for a number of different situations. They are very handy assets to have. We've got them sitting in our road yard, easily accessible. There's a number of people in the team that know how to operate them. You can change the messaging remotely. Investment and very well utilised.
Any points of clarification? If not, it's proposed that we take these as three separate motions. The recommendations are on page 28 of the agenda. We start with the first one, that the 2024-27 Transport Improvement Project Prioritisation Report be received. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Boynton, Councillor Riles. Any debate? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Item 2, that the Infrastructure and Planning Committee endorse the prioritisation process for the development of the 2024-27 Transport Improvements Program. Second is okay, Councillor Dennis and Councillor James. Any debate? We'll put the motion. Councillor Riles.
Is this subject to this coalition government's approval now, or is this one already set in?
So it's kind of covered in the third recommendation. The actual delivery of the program will be subject to our LTP long-term plan approval, which I probably also should have said, also the National Land Transport Program approval. So they're both submitted. So far, haven't really had any queries or concerns from the initial reviews of what the Kotahi have done of our proposed program, but they are still working through that process. But so yeah, this, like I said at the start, the purpose of bringing this now is more just to approve the process in terms of how things are prioritised for us, and that we do, that is our local decision how things are prioritised. But then the actual confirmed projects that make up the program will be dependent on where the long-term plan budget sits. But because the prioritisation process is approved, we know that those closer near the top are highly likely to proceed, and it's more if budgets come down, those at the bottom, which would be the latter years, to give us more time for planning and design.
Any further debate on recommendation 2? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 3, that the Infrastructure and Planning Committee endorse the prioritised projects identified for delivery in the 2024-27 Transport Improvements Program, subject to the final approved corresponding budget in the 2024-27 long-term plan. We have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Ringiaho, Deputy Mayor Emick. So, any debate? There is none. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So, that's the end of our agenda. So, I'll thank you all for your attendance. Thank you to the staff. Our first live streaming. The wheels didn't fall off, so that's worked well. So to conclude the meeting, I'll invite Councillor O'Brien to close the RFP. Thank you.
Tātou te inu e tātou. Kia tau ki a tātou katoa e tātou whai o tātou ariki hu karaiti. Te aro o te atua me te whewhinga tahitangi, te wairua tapu ake. Ake.
Thank you.